Hello friends, this is a very special video. I'm about to share with you what I've identified as the 5 types of people that we become as we evolve and journey through the spiritual spectrum. Let's go. Okay, before I begin, just remember that each of us at any time could be anywhere on the spiritual spectrum. And if your conscious awareness is open, you will actually be all 5 types of people on the spiritual spectrum any one time or another. So no judgment here. In fact, understanding these 5 roles that we play throughout life is a great way to understand that we're each going through this together as one reflection. So let's get to it. Okay, number 1, the autopilot. Here's where most people appear to be firmly planted on the spiritual spectrum, and where all of us begin the journey. Just as the name suggests, when we are on autopilot, we are what people often refer to as asleep. It is when we simply react to the stimuli around us, and our programmed and conditioned mindset just is on autopilot. You know the routine: wake up, go to work, come home, watch TV, pay bills, wait to die. Many people live their entire lives this way, from birth to death, like ants in the colony, without exploring or expanding their conscious awareness to any major degree. And that's okay, that's to be accepted, because we've all been there and we all revert back to that archetype of being throughout this process on the spiritual spectrum. In fact, it is so embedded into us by society that it has become our comfort zone, until for many of us, being the autopilot becomes uncomfortable, which leads to number 2. The suffering. Oh, the suffering. Just as all of us are very familiar with the autopilot role that we sometimes play, we're often too familiar with the suffering archetype on the spiritual spectrum. The suffering is anxiety, depression, loneliness, anger, physical illness, jealousy, resentment, and all the emotions that hurt as a result of fear and perceived loss. Yet, the suffering is such a gift. It is what shakes us and wakes us out of the autopilot mode. The suffering is our stern teacher that bops us on the head and forces us to understand that we will never be happy and fulfilled living our lives on autopilot. The suffering is where the autopilot's crusty eyes begin to open like a newborn baby, crying for help. Why me? Often being forced into understanding that there has to be something more to life than eating, sleeping, social media, sex, TV, food, alcohol, and drugs. And just like the autopilot, we all revert back to suffering once in a while, or a lot, as we journey along the spiritual spectrum. So be kind and compassionate to the suffering you see around you, because we all take a turn on that merry-go-round. Number 3, the seeking. If you're watching this video, it's more than likely that you are centered at this place, smack dab in the middle of the spiritual spectrum. And much like Alice in Wonderland, you have discovered that a whole new world of possibilities exists. But you might feel a little lost, a little disoriented at the same time. And the question that the hookah-smoking caterpillar asked Alice is very appropriate here. Who are you? So, seekers come in all varieties, but usually the most intense seeker is born out of the most intense suffering. But being a seeker can be a trap of the ego. That constant searching can cause you to convince yourself that with every piece of knowledge that you gather, like breadcrumbs along the trail, you are leveling up and your ego is dissolving along the way. And this may be true, but remember that this can also be how the ego keeps entering through the back door over and over and over. You see, we search for enlightenment, clarity, peace, bliss, happiness, and freedom. Yet we cling so hard to searching for these things that we never quite arrive, continuously on an unending quest to find freedom and constantly convincing ourselves that one day we'll find it. Then we exhaust ourselves and fall back into the suffering until it hurts enough that we go back to seeking and searching again in a vicious cycle to heal ourselves and attain something that is always just out of reach, always hoping that we can grab our shadow by the tail. Sound familiar? Number 4, the allowing. Now, at some point on the vicious cycle of seeking and then suffering, you just give up. And this is the greatest thing that can happen to the seeker. Many times we give up, but we return to the autopilot just to get a break from all the seeking and suffering. But that does not last long before we're back on the wheel of seeking and suffering. And that vicious cycle, that wheel of fortune, eventually spins so fast that one day we just give up completely. And that hurls us into a place where we're so exhausted that we finally allow, and we get a taste, a glimpse of true freedom. But the ego still rears its head, and we foolishly begin searching and seeking, trying to find ways that we can allow, which is hilariously ironic. But indeed, you are transitioning and transforming from the seeking to the allowing. At first, it's a delicate dance, but if you remain aware, the allowing begins to reveal itself more and more as the way. The more you allow, the more peace, clarity, and bliss enter. And you begin to realize that it is the self, the you, that you've been clinging to that is to be released. It feels so luscious to be free of the suffering and the seeking that you feel at home. And that allowing opens up the gates to freedom. It is Dorothy's ruby red slippers that have been on your feet the entire journey, and all you had to do is click your heels and return home and wake up. Number 5, the free. I love you. Mwah.